Hi, I'm Ted Blank. I'm the owner of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and I'm excited today to talk about river cruising in Europe. And specifically, we're going to take a look at the two most popular river cruises, the Rhine River and the Danube River. So one of the things that I do as a travel advisor is I answer a lot of questions for my clients. And when we talk about river cruising, one of the most commonly asked questions is, which river should I take my first river cruise on? And so for folks who are considering going to Europe on a river cruise, the answer to that question is usually going to be either the Rhine River or the Danube River. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about each river to give you a little bit of insight into what makes them different, what makes them unique, and which one might be best for you. Now the good news is there's no right answer to this question. If you pick the Danube, you'll like it. If you pick the Rhine, you'll like it. And the good news is next time you can go back and try the other river. But let's start by taking a look at the Rhine River. So Rhine River cruises start in Amsterdam in Holland, and they end in Basel in Switzerland. And the Rhine River makes its way through Germany and then kind of down along the border of France in the province of Alsace-Lorraine before ending in Switzerland. And so a 7-day cruise on the Rhine River will typically start in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam, of course, is that quintessential Dutch capital. It's full of canals, there are windmills nearby, you can taste some Edam cheese, you can actually watch wooden clogs be made. Amsterdam also has some incredible art museums that you can go see, and it's a really great place to start a river cruise. So as the ship leaves Amsterdam, it's going to start sailing through Germany. One of the first ports that most river cruises call at is the city of Cologne. And Cologne is a major city in Germany. It's famous for two things. It's famous for its beer, and it's famous for its cathedral. The cathedral in Germany is called a dome, D-O-M, and the cathedral in Cologne is one of the largest cathedrals in Western Europe, and it is also the site of the relics of the three magi. So the three wise men from the story of Jesus, their bones are kept in the cathedral at Cologne, and you can actually go see them on your river cruise. After the river cruise leaves Cologne, you're going to enter into really, I think, one of the scenic highlights of Europe, and actually one of the scenic highlights of river cruising anywhere in the world, and that's the Rhine River Gorge. And that's where the big, wide Rhine River all of a sudden gets really narrow, and it starts to undulate its way through these tall mountain peaks that are covered with historic castles. And eventually you come to a very, very narrow point in the river where it's just barely wide enough for one ship to get its way through there. And so it's this incredibly beautiful, it's about a 4 or 5 hour scenic cruise. And the place where it ends is a site that's very famous in German legend and German myth, and that is where the Lorelei hung out. And the Lorelei were mermaids, and these were mermaids who preyed on sailors back in the time when there were mermaids. And Wagner made the Lorelei very famous in one of his operas. So after you avoid the Lorelei and pass out of the Rhine River Gorge, you'll actually be in a beautiful part of Germany where they grow a lot of wine. And so most river cruises will stop in one of the small towns in this area. You can get off, you can actually see wine being made, you can take a cable car up to one of the mountaintops and have a view over the panoramic view over the Rhine River. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful stretch of river. And that whole day, that whole scenic day of cruising and then exploring the countryside is really one of the highlights of a Rhine River cruise. So as we continue our journey down the Rhine River, the next place we're going to stop is actually in France, and it's the city of Strasbourg. Strasbourg is the capital of the Alsace-Lorraine region of France. And Alsace-Lorraine, if you know a little bit about European history, it kind of bounced back and forth between France and Germany many times, so it's a very diverse history, very troubled history in some ways, but it's also a very French city. And so Strasbourg has a beautiful cathedral. Inside of the cathedral, there is this astronomical clock that imitates the movement of the planets that you can watch. It's really an incredible site. Strasbourg has some beautiful neighborhoods you can explore. There's a particular neighborhood called Petite France, which is full of half-timbered houses and beautiful flowers, and it's just an incredibly beautiful area. And of course, if you like France and if you like things French, you have the opportunity to sample some French wine, some French cuisine, and really enjoy the good life of France in Strasbourg and the region around Strasbourg. Then the cruise will kind of cross over the river back into Germany, and you'll have an opportunity to explore the Black Forest. And the Black Forest is named the Black Forest because it's a very dark forest. It's very densely forested. The city of Baden-Baden is located in the Black Forest. Baden-Baden is famous for its spas, but these aren't spas like we think of spas today. These are spas from the turn of the 18th and 19th century, so they're big, grand, elegant buildings with giant pools and natural springs. There's a casino. It's a beautiful, sort of a lifestyles of the rich and famous type town that you can explore. And then the cruise will continue and it will finally end in the port of Basel, Switzerland. And Basel itself isn't the most interesting place in the world, but it's the gateway to Switzerland. And Switzerland is one of my favorite countries in Europe. The scenery is incredible. There are some fantastic hotels, incredible train ride experiences. If you're into mountain climbing or mountain biking or any kind of adventure, the Rhine River Gorge is the scenic highlight, and you have the opportunity to visit Holland and Germany and France and Switzerland on a Rhine River cruise. So now let's head across to the other side of Germany, to the area near Munich in Bavaria, and let's take a look at what a cruise down the Danube River would look like. Cruises down the Danube River typically depart from the little town of Passau, which is about 2 hours away from Munich, and most people who go on a Rhine River cruise will actually start the cruise in Munich and spend a little bit of time in that really interesting city. If you are into Oktoberfest, a little hint is that October is a great time to go, but any time of the year is a great time to visit Munich. So you'll transfer to Passau and you'll board your river cruise ship for your cruise down the Danube River. Now the Danube has a very different historical focus than the Rhine River, because as soon as you board the ship, you're going to cross the border and you're going to enter the country of Austria. And once you enter Austria, you're really entering into the old Austrian or the old Habsburg Empire. So you're going from the Rhine River, which is very much Western Europe, to the Danube River, which is very much Eastern Europe, and very quickly you'll go through Austria and enter into Hungary and Slovakia, which are really Eastern European countries. But the entire time you're on the Danube River, you'll be traveling through the old Habsburg Austrian Empire. So the first port of call on a Danube River cruise is normally the city of Linz in Austria. And Linz is really the gateway to Salzburg in Austria. So if you're a Sound of Music fan, Salzburg, of course, is where The Sound of Music was filmed. And when you go to visit Salzburg, you can see the Von Trapp family villa, you can see the abbey where Maria lived, you can see the church where they got married, and you can actually experience the entire Sound of Music story. A little hint is that Hollywood makes things look a little different on screen than they look in reality, but you'll definitely recognize some of the sites in Salzburg. But Salzburg is also Mozart's birthplace. You can visit the house where he was born, and you can walk around the beautiful old town of Salzburg, which is has some very, very narrow streets. They might be only 10 or 20 feet wide, no cars allowed. A really interesting European city. Then the cruise will head into an area called the Wachau Valley. And the Wachau Valley is sort of the garden of Austria. It's where a lot of Austrian wine is produced. They grow apricots there. They make apricot brandy there. There's a beautiful abbey called the Abbey of Melk that overlooks the Danube River. That's an absolute highlight of the cruise as you explore the Wachau Valley. Now, if you're an active person and you want to get off and go for a bike ride, you can actually get off the ship, go for a bike ride, and then the ship will pick you up at the next place it stops. So there's a tremendous amount of things to do and see in the Wachau Valley. But then the next highlight of the cruise is a visit to Vienna. And Vienna, of course, is the old imperial capital of the Austrian Empire. It is the home of the famous Sacher Torte, which is that little flourless chocolate cake that you can enjoy with a cup of coffee in one of the traditional Viennese cafes. If you like classical music, there are classical music concerts everywhere in Vienna taking place all the time. And certainly you don't want to miss the incredible Schönbrunn Palace, which was the country estate of the Austrian emperors back when there were emperors of Austria. It really rivals Versailles in France as one of the most incredible palaces in the world, and it's open to the public. You can go and discover the palace and its gardens, which are really quite lovely. Then as you leave Vienna, you're actually going to cross over the old Iron Curtain, and you're going to cross into Eastern Europe. So most river cruises will stop in the capital of Slovakia, in a city called Bratislava, and then they're going to continue down through Slovakia into Hungary. And you're going to arrive at the terminus of the river cruise, which is the city of Budapest. Budapest is a European capital. It has a very rich history. a very rich culture, but it's very, very different than cities you would have experienced in Western Europe. The culture is different, the food is different, the architecture is different. Budapest is the home to that magnificent Parliament building that you often see on TV in ads for river cruises. It has some incredible walks, beautiful architecture. One of my favorite places in Budapest is actually a spice market. And you can walk into this big glass-covered building that's a spice market, and you just see all these rich and varied spices from Hungary and farther into the east, and it's really a feast for all your senses. So I think the must-see on the Rhine River is actually a little town in Alsace called Rhine River. And the live-action movie Beauty and the Beast was filmed there, and when you get there you'll see why. It's this beautiful, historic, half-timbered city that's absolutely oozing with French charm. My must-see on the Danube River is the Abbey of Melk in Austria. It's a stunning Baroque abbey with beautiful architecture, but the real highlight is when you walk out the door at the end of your tour and you have this incredible panoramic view of the Danube Valley right below you. So both the Danube and the Rhine are interesting, scenic, and historic cruises that I think you would enjoy taking. You can learn more by visiting my website at tedblanktravel.com. Click below to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and join us for the next video where we're going to talk about the 4 other rivers in Europe that you can take a cruise on.